Good afternoon. I'm Kathleen Pavelko. I'm the President and CEO of WITF Public Media here in Harrisburg, and it's my honor to welcome all of you to our first major launch event surrounding the Battling Opioids project of Pennsylvania Public Media. I'd like especially to thank Senator Corman, Senator Yaw, Representative Camp, Representative Reed, and all the distinguished members of the Senate and House. We thank them for their support of this important project and for many of them being with us today. I'd also like to thank Geisinger for its support in supporting the Battling Opioids project. In addition, I'd like to recognize and identify my public media colleagues who are in attendance. If you'll just sort of wave at me, we'll get that done. Tom Cura of WVIA in Pittston, covering northeastern Pennsylvania. Carrie Kozicki from WLVT PBS 39 in the Lehigh Valley. Kate D'Amico and Isabel Reinert from WPSU and State College. John Massoni and Susan Catrasols of WHYY in Philadelphia, and Tom New of WQLN in Erie. We convene regularly on issues of shared concern, both among public media professionals and of concern here in the Commonwealth. We are convened today here in the state's capital during National Recovery Month to update you on the progress of Pennsylvania Public Media's Battling Opioids project, and to give you a preview of a documentary that will air Thursday night across the Commonwealth. As you know, our state is one of the hardest hit by the opioid epidemic in the nation. Last year, we lost more than 14 Pennsylvanians every day to overdoses, and more than 900 babies were born with neonatal abstinence syndrome in the first 6 months of this year. That's why we're grateful to the members of the legislature who've recognized the power of public media to both educate the public about the risks of opioid addiction and to help reduce the stigma around addiction so that more people will seek help for themselves and their loved ones before tragedy strikes. By broadcasting stories of people across the state from all walks of life and through organizing community events where dialogue is encouraged, we are working to reverse the awful trend for good. Our main goal is to direct people in Pennsylvania to state and local opioid resources by connecting them to solutions at a personal level. Our hope is that through collective statewide efforts, our citizens will see stories of hope and survival and have access to information on where to gain help. By definition, public media has always served the public, airing political debates, providing information on issues of health, arts, and culture. But this is the first time that Pennsylvania's 7 public media stations are bringing our resources together to bear on a statewide crisis. Before you leave, I hope you will take with you the flyers that are on the chairs there to update you on the breadth of our effort. And in addition to the Battling Opioids documentary, in the next few months, you should look forward to the following. Our robust website, it's battlingopioids.org, where Pennsylvanians can watch personal stories, learn how to help, and locate events and conversations in their areas. We also have launched active social media channels on Facebook and Twitter that have already reached tens of thousands of Pennsylvanians with stories, insights, and information about where to find help. We've produced 14 television segments featuring diverse viewpoints and experiences, and those have been shared on the website and statewide across social media channels. And we've connected thousands of visitors to Pennsylvania's state helpline and website to help them, allow them to get help for a loved one. And we're raising our visibility through billboards, events, media relations, and digital advertising. This Saturday, a Battling Opioids contingent marched with more than 25,000 people in the Pro-Act Recovery Walk at Penn's Landing in Philadelphia. And on October 12th, we will be in front of a sold-out crowd of 12,000 with a booth and presentation at the very well-attended Pennsylvania Conference for Women. In short, I hope you will agree with me that Battling Opioids is off to a strong start, and we thank you for your support. And now it's my pleasure to invite to the podium one of our Public Television Caucus chairs, Representative Warren Camp. Representative?
So I'm one of the co-chairs of the Public Television Caucus, and I think based on what you just heard, it's totally sensible to be one of the co-chairmen of this caucus. Public television is a deliverer of information of enormous value to the citizens of the Commonwealth, and it has been for decades. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania does support financially public television, at this point at a fairly small level. There was a time some years ago when there were very significant dollars in support of public television, and we hope in this caucus, I think, to return to those days sometime soon. It was very easy for me to agree to be one of the co-chairs. I myself, as a child and now as an adult, have been a beneficiary of the excellent programming that has been a part of the culture of public television in Pennsylvania for a very long time. And this initiative that you all are embarking on, which is a public health crisis in our country, but obviously also here in the Commonwealth, is a clear example of the value, the public value, that public television stations around the Commonwealth deliver to our citizens. There should be no doubt among anyone in the legislature or in the governor's mansion or anywhere in any corner of the state that the information, the programming, the initiatives, the public outreach, the professional delivery of knowledge that all of you are engaged in is critical to us as a Commonwealth, a collective mindset, learning how to solve problems. And this is one of our biggest problems, and you have not shrunk from facing it. You are taking it head on. So that's Exhibit A in our case this budget year for it's time to support public television even more. I'm grateful to be here. I wish you all the luck with this initiative, and I hope you'll forgive me, but I have to go back and do a little bit more work. Thank you very much.
We're very grateful to the Public Television Caucus chairs for their support and the great success we've enjoyed because of their support. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Senator Jean Yaw from the Hope Caucus to share a few words about the important work that that caucus is undertaking. Senator?
Thank you. On the original program, Senator Corman was supposed to introduce me, so since he's not here, I'll just say nice things about myself. So in any event, I first became involved with this problem, the opioid problem, started with originally with heroin, when some people came to me on the floor of the Senate and asked whether I could use the Center for Rural Pennsylvania, which I chair, as a vehicle to raise the awareness of the heroin problem in rural Pennsylvania. Well, I mean, to make a very long story short, we've had, I think, 13 hearings throughout the state over 5 years. There's about 80 hours worth of presentations on my website. And I know when we talked about this, how important it was to get the community involved. The Hope Caucus, probably it was something that was brought together at the time, and once again, the mission was to raise awareness of the problem, especially in the legislature. I think, frankly, that the Hope Caucus accomplished its mission. And really what's happening now is there are many, many things that the legislators are aware of, and there are many pieces of legislation now out there dealing with the heroin opioid problem. I'd just like to mention a few things that the legislature has accomplished, and I'll talk about some of the things I think are really pending current, and give you some things that battling opioids can really, in my opinion, help throughout the state. The first legislation we passed, that is going back through it that I could find, was in 2014, and that was the Good Samaritan bill, or what's known as the Good Samaritan, which basically It helped with naloxone, making naloxone available. And it also provided immunity for someone if you called to get help for a friend or somebody that had overdosed, that you would be immune from suit. There are some few problems with that, but we're working around those. We limited the prescriptions to minors. The reason for minors is because they're very, very susceptible. And that when minors, anybody under 17, that's when, sports injuries, wisdom teeth, all that type of thing. We passed, all these are bills which the governor has signed. So both the House and the Senate has been involved in them. We have mandatory education for healthcare providers, which was never out there before. We have mandatory education now in Pennsylvania medical schools. What we found out is that veterinarians receive more training in healthcare or in pain management than medical doctors. We thought that that was something that we should really address. We limited opioids coming out of the emergency room to no more than 7 days. We regulated recovery houses. Those are just some. There are many other ones, and I could talk for a long time about this. But currently, I have a bill pending, Senate Bill 472, which would take this limitation to 7 days across the board. I read an article today by a UPMC doctor that said, first of all, 1 out of every 4 people are susceptible to drug addiction. That's kind of scary. Just look, you look around here. And he also said that if you give greater than a 1-week supply of an opioid as a prescription, you have a 50% chance that that person will still be using opioids a year from now. Just think of that, 7 days. I know in the hearings that we've had, some people can become addicted in as little as 10 days. Addiction is not a moral shortcoming. It's a brain disease. I'll talk about that in a minute. One of the other things that we've talked about also is the benefits of e-prescribing. So have electronic signatures now for any opioid, and we're working on that. There's a bill pending in the House that would accomplish that, and we encourage that. What I said is, I'll give you 2 talking points which you can take in your battling opioids across the board and across the state, in my opinion. Food for thought. First of all, we don't treat addiction like a disease. We just don't do it. The politically correct thing to say is, oh, it's a disease. That is the politically correct thing, but we don't treat it like a disease. If I tell you I'm going to buy a house next to you, and by the way, I'm a diabetic and I take insulin every day, you're going to say, oh, okay, so what? If I tell you I'm an addict, I'm going to buy a house next to you, and by the way, I take Suboxone or methadone every day, I guarantee you, you're going to look at the person differently. It's not a moral shortcoming. One of the things, we're having a hearing next week on the issue that addiction is a brain disease. It affects every one of us differently. Some people can take a 30-day supply of opioids, have no effect. Other people, as I said, in as little as 7 or 10 days can become addicted. It's just like some of our bodies work well when it comes to processing sugars. Some of us don't work well. Some of us have high blood pressure. We have to take medicine every day or something along those lines. We don't treat drug addiction the same way, which leads to my other point. And I've done some reading about this, and we're having a hearing next week that we intend to explore the whole aspect of brain disease and what happened in France. This is amazing to me. 1995, France faced a major drug epidemic with heroin and opioids. 1995, 20-some years ago, or 30, 20-some years ago, I guess it is. And what they did is they increased medication-assisted treatment by the use of buprenorphine, which is commonly called Suboxone, which is a drug that's taken every day. It allows the person to function. You can have a family, you can have a job, you can go to church and do all those things. In a 4-year period, by changing the way that they looked at Suboxone, their drug overdoses dropped by almost 80% in a 4-year period. Now, we have work to do, and this is why I think that the public television can really help in this regard. We need help from the federal government because there's requirements out there now that limit the way that Suboxone can be prescribed. The doctors have to have extra training. What France did is they made it available to every family practitioner, which does all kinds of things. First of all, it removes the stigma. If you're going to your family doctor, everybody goes to their family doctor. But those are the types of things, and in the United States, in order to prescribe Suboxone, you have to have additional training, and you're limited into the number of patients you can have, which, does that make any sense in today's world? I'm not sure. I think that we need to, and this is something that I think that we could start here in Pennsylvania, and you could be a big help to do something along those lines, and maybe we can start a national movement to say, hey, here's a way that we can treat it. It worked in France. Why wouldn't it work here? So with that, thank you. I've got to go too. Senator Corman was not here because he's in the middle of a caucus also. Thank you.
I think it's pretty clear from Senator Yaw's remarks that he's been deeply involved and deeply concerned about this issue for a very long time, where all Pennsylvanians should be very grateful about his concerns. And now Representative Doyle Heffley is with us. He too has been deeply involved in this issue for a considerable period, leading the charge in the House. Representative?
Thank you, and I just want to commend public broadcasting for putting this to the forefront, this epidemic, this scourge, as we had remarked this morning and talking about it. You know, you run for office and you don't know what you're going to get involved in. I come from a trucking background. I thought, I'm going to go and pass a bunch of trucking bills. So I had a couple of moms come to my office, and I went to school with most of them, and they came in, and one of them had lost her 15-year-old son to a methadone overdose. And she had, it was very heart-wrenching to listen to her tell the story. Every time she hears a screen door slam, she thinks it's him coming home. I went to school with her and her husband, and I've seen it throughout the community, this epidemic. It started with the prescribing, and as the senator highlighted, so a lot of the good work that we've done in the state to combat it and cut down on the prescribing, and we have some bills, and I have some bills, and we're going to continue to work on that, but I think that there's a couple of different ways. Education, I think, is key to really highlight and explain how dangerous these opioid prescription drugs are and how addictive they are and what it can lead to. It affects, there's addicts in nursing homes, and there's babies being born addicted to heroin. It affects every age group. It doesn't matter what your social economic background is. So many people fall into the trap of addiction through workers' comp or an injury. I had a family that comes to my office quite a bit. They're very active in the community. Their son was hurt in a car accident, and he got addicted to the pain pills and died of an overdose a few years later. So the veterans returning home. So to those that inspire me, I want to thank them for their road to recovery and what they do every day to inspire me to continue to work hard, and to all those that have lost loved ones. I just feel when we talk about this, like there's a bunch of hands reaching out from the grave saying, you guys got to fix this, you got to do something. So if we can bring light in this TV series to get people to understand it. I tell people all the time, if you have an addicted person in your household, get Narcan. Keep it in your house. And you hear people all the time, oh, you know, they're addicts, don't use it. Well, what if it's your son? What if it's your daughter? What if it's your loved one? And recovery is an option. I walk every year in our Carbon County Recovery Walk. We just had it every year. It grows, it gets bigger. It means there's more people in recovery. So thank you for the good work that you do. Keep up the fight, and I'll keep doing whatever I can on my end to assist you in that battle. Thank you.
We've got real fighters in this Capitol. That's great to know. I'd like to introduce Ray Barashansky. Ray has a bunch of titles. One of them is Deputy Secretary of Health, but he also has a really impressive one that speaks to the challenges that we're facing. He is Incident Commander for the Opioid Operational Command Center. That's an impressive title and an important one because it talks about immediate and important response, right?
Thank you. I feel like you set the bar high, both in regard to my title, as well as the people who got to speak here just before me. On behalf of Governor Tom Wolf and Secretary of Health Rachel Levine, I want to thank you all. Thank you for being here today, but thank you for the opportunity to speak with all of you. The Wolf administration is committed to working to respond to the opioid crisis and the effect it's having on our families, our loved ones, and our communities. Senator Yaw made an exceptional point just now when he said that we need to remember that addiction is a disease. And that's literally one of the thoughts that guide me as I work on the governor's disaster declaration speaking to opioids. The governor's first disaster declaration, which was made in January but has been renewed twice since then, got multiple state agencies to the table, literally and figuratively, to understand who was doing what data we were not collecting, what data we were collecting, and what still needed to be done. In addition, there were multiple state agencies. Some were health-based, some were human services-based. Drug and alcohol was there, corrections was there, Pennsylvania State Police was there, and we considered it an all-hands-on-deck effort. We realized we all have a part in this crisis. So I know that you spoke about neonatal abstinence syndrome, as did one other person, and that's one of the initiatives we're working on. Sadly, it's not what I'm going to focus on today. I did want to focus on some of our initiatives because I do want to make people aware of what goes on every Monday morning at PIMA at 9:30 in the morning when we all sit together. One of the first initiatives we worked on was waiving of fees for birth certificates for individuals with opioid use disorder. And I don't know if people realize it, but in order to get into treatment, you need definitive identification. And birth certificate is one of those forms of definitive identification. The Department of Health charges $20 for a birth certificate fee. And the waiving of a $20 fee may not seem like a big deal as we sit here, but to someone who's trying to get into treatment and someone who needs just that piece of identification to get into treatment, this could be impactful. To date, since that first disaster declaration, the department has waived nearly 800 fees in this regard, and we have 50 to 60 more that we're waiting for additional information on. We consider people getting into treatment and getting that identification to be a priority. Another critical initiative that was implemented, and this was at the request of various emergency medical services agencies and public health agencies, was the implementation of a naloxone leave behind program. What this department does is we allow emergency medical services providers to leave the critical medication naloxone or Narcan behind on a scene after an opioid overdose has been reversed. To date, hundreds of doses have been left behind on emergency scenes by our EMS providers here in the Commonwealth. And in case you think we're that unique, the Fire Department of New York, the single largest EMS agency in the United States, started their own naloxone leave behind program just 2 weeks ago. In addition, in last year's budget, Governor Wolf specifically allotted $5 million for the purchase of naloxone for both traditional and non-traditional first responders. So we think of first responders and we think police, EMS, and fire. In addition, we have social service agencies, we have public health entities, even other agencies that have a need for naloxone, or the people they serve have a need for naloxone. This program is spearheaded by PCCD, the Commission on Crime and Delinquency, and to date, there have been nearly 3,000 saves from that naloxone. To say that's impressive would be an understatement. Also during this time period, the governor's opioid data dashboard was created to help the public gain access and information to what resources are available locally, what's going on in their counties, what resources can be deployed there as well. And most recently, one of the initiatives I'm very proud of is what we call the epicenter alerts. So the Opioid Command Center has implemented these to communicate unusually high numbers of overdoses to the various areas that may be seeing them. So whether it's through syndromic surveillance of our emergency department data or our emergency medical services data, we turn that information around through our Bureau of Epidemiology and notify everybody with a stake in this fight of what's going on in their immediate areas. Since we implemented that, I believe it was only within the last 6 to 7 weeks, We've already had more than half a dozen epicenter alerts, and we've notified all sorts of agencies in that area. Wow. What else have we done? Well, on top of all the agencies that came with us for the first disaster declaration, we also realized that we needed more. We needed additional agencies there as well. So in our second and third disaster declaration, we've included additional agencies, whether that's the Department of Education, Department of Military and Veterans Affairs, someone mentioned that, and even the State Fire Commissioner. We brought them to the table. But one of the other things that also happens at the Monday morning meeting is this: we hear from people out in the field. So whether that's those in recovery, local public health, a county EMS agency, we hear what's working and what's not. And we try to modify what we're doing. We modify our initiatives based on what's working and based on what's not. The Department of Health, the Wolf administration, we're aware that the opioid crisis is the most significant public health threat of our decades. This is a crisis for our friends, our families, and our community. But I want everybody to remember that together, we can make a difference. Thank you.
An impressive and growing list of initiatives. And now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Tom Cura. He's the general manager of WVIA in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, but he's also the executive producer of the documentary that will be airing statewide on all 7 public television stations. Tom?
Thank you. Script, please. All righty. How's everybody doing? I got it here. Keep talking to me. All right. I'm well, thank you. Thank you, Ray, and Senator Corman is not here today, but I know he's been doing a lot of work, and Senator Yaw and Representative Kemp and Reed and Heffley. We thank you for all the work you've been doing in the statewide opioid crisis. As Kathleen said, I'm Tom Cura. I'm the President and CEO of WVIA, and I'm also the executive producer of the Battling Opioid Collaborative. We are proud to be working to support the resources of the Commonwealth has put into place. We truly believe that battling opioids is a model of government and media partnership that has tremendous potential. We're using our combined resources, TV, radio, online, social, digital, community outreach events, and for one common good, to save lives. Next on the agenda, we are going to view an excerpt of Battling Opioids, the 60-minute news magazine airing Thursday night at 8 p.m. across all 7 public media stations. The program will be followed by a 30-minute live panel discussion led by our program host, Paula Giangiacomo. This 13-minute excerpt features 3 of the stories that will be airing on Thursday night. In the first, from WQED in Pittsburgh, Beth Zeiss and Bill Wall, parents of Chris Wall, recount a difficult facing their son's addiction. Following his passing, they established Chris's room at the SPHS Center of Excellence in Washington, Pennsylvania, to help others in recovery. We are honored to have Beth here today. Thank you for coming, Beth. The second segment, WVIA's Pittston interviewed Alexis Johnson, who's also here today. Her segment tells a story of how she unwittingly became addicted to opioids following her car accident, and how she came back from the brink to live a full life. And the third piece, WLVT in Bethlehem, tells a story of Jeremy Wheaton, who was living on the street, his young daughter removed from his custody, when he found a road to recovery at the Hogar Career Ministry in Freemansburg, Pennsylvania. We believe stories like these give hope to people struggling with addiction. We believe they give permission for spouses, parents, friends to ask for help without fear of judgment. We believe we can help reframe addiction as a health issue without moral baggage. Other stations contribute segments that educate. One, describes take-back programs for safe disposal of unused medications in the house. Others address the false assumption of Narcan and how it can reverse all overdoses. Thursday night's program is our first collaboration news magazine. We plan to air it again in December in advance of the holidays. We are planning a new program in the spring of 2019. In addition, we are distributing the story segments through social media channels to enhance reach and sharing of content. We are making this episode available to community groups who wish to host community conversations around them. We have posted a tip sheet on battlingopioids.org, providing guidance and suggested questions to promote constructive dialogue. We look forward to hearing your feedback at the reception following the formal part of the program. So now, without further ado, here's Battling Opioids, an excerpt of Battling Opioids.
It could be your sister, your child, your parent, your grandparent, your neighbor, even your colleague. Opioids do not discriminate. The opioid crisis has become a nationwide issue. It was declared a public health emergency by President Trump in October 2017, and a disaster emergency in Pennsylvania by Governor Wolf in January of 2018. The CDC notes Pennsylvania is one of the 5 states hit hardest by the opioid epidemic, and it is seeing increases in overdoses across age groups, racial ethnic groups, and in urban and rural areas. In Pennsylvania, approximately 13 people die a day from an opioid overdose, according to a study from the University of Pittsburgh. Pennsylvania's 7 public media stations have joined together with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to confront this crisis head-on. In this program, we'll tell compelling personal stories of hope and survival. In addition, we'll provide information and help direct people to the resources they need.
I'm Beth, and this is Bill, our mom and dad of our son Chris Wall. This picture was taken of him when he was graduating from high school. But tragically, Chris died when he was 33 years old from a heroin fentanyl overdose. He went to Penn State and graduated with an industrial engineering degree.
We wanted to be upfront because there's no sense hiding from it. It's a disease. Chris touched a lot of people, and they saw the obituary and wanted to contribute. So this room was created in the memory of our son Chris as a place of respite for people who are in treatment for addiction. There were gaps during the course of treatment, and I think this room helps kind of bridge that gap. You cannot allow people to go in for 3 days for detox and maybe 3 weeks, and then you're out on the street again.
This room is a safe place for me. I've seen people sleep in here, people doing their laundry, showering, eating, and just being able to sit down and talk to someone, listening to someone, giving them advice is hugely beneficial to me and my recovery.
It's just so nice to have this back here. You know, even just to find a book and sit and read the book and, you know, relax for a minute.
These stones, which represent loved ones who have been lost as a result of drug abuse. This stone right here with Jessica written on it. Jessica was an ex-girlfriend of mine who died of a heroin overdose. Lots of things trigger my anxiety, and coming to this room, I'm able to get away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life.
I come here just to get out of the cold. There's always, a place to rest.
People call people in Chris's situation, they call them junkies. And junkie is a terrible term to use for someone who's battling addiction, battling a disease.
Remember, Chris says, I just hate people look at me like I'm broken. The bottom line is we have to get rid of the stigma so that people can seek the treatment that they need and the support from everyone around them.
It's a tragedy what happened to the son, but for them to do something, such great memory of him, to help out someone like me.
Even though they lost their son, they're still willing to help other people in recovery.
If this place wasn't here, I don't know where I'd be. I might be dead right now.
It makes me proud, in a sense, that he touched so many lives. If there's anything good that can come of this, maybe this is it.
I think he'd love this.
He would.
I think he'd think it would be awesome.
So I was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and I grew up in Archibald, Pennsylvania, and I had a beautiful upbringing. I had my life ahead of me. I came from a good family. There was really no drug use in my family. Where my life really took a turn for the worse was when opioids were introduced into my life. I was working at a bar in Scranton, and I was rushing to get to work. I was running late, and I hit a really bad rainstorm, and I hydroplaned. It was an extremely bad car accident. I was prescribed Xanax and Percocet for everything that had happened, and that's where I learned how to start abusing doctor-prescribed medication. In 2008, I didn't know anything about addiction. I wasn't aware of what was happening to my body. I just knew that I didn't have this pill, and I felt like garbage. So when I took the pills, I felt better. And then, you get more pills and your dosage goes higher, and then you start taking more. And at one point in time, I was actually getting over 600 Percocets a month, and it got ridiculously out of control. The pills weren't working anymore, so I ended up graduating to heroin. I started off sniffing it, and eventually started shooting it. I would cry to God every day to take my life. I would sit in a mirror and just pick and pick. I actually took an X-Acto knife to my face, and I cut my face here and all over. I have a massive scar. I look like the Night of the Living Dead. I was a walking corpse. My life now is awesome. At almost 3 years sober, it feels incredible. Fitness is such a huge passion of mine. I love bodybuilding, but I also love pushing myself way past limits. It breaks me down, it builds me up. It's cool because I've been able to smash a lot of barriers in the fitness world for recovering addicts. I did my first fitness competition in April of last year. It's WBFF, which stands for World Beauty Fitness and Fashion Federation. I came in top 15 for my first competition. I have been in numerous publications. I've been on the cover of magazines, and Status Fitness magazine did a huge article on me about my story. The addiction used to be such a taboo, and now when I do these photo shoots, everybody wants to bring my story into it. My biggest modeling accomplishment, Playboy Australia 2018. I'm one of the first models that they were able to do the story on addiction. Everybody including women, have supported it because of the integrity and my message and wanting to motivational speak and help teens. My goal in life is to help people and give back. What I've been through in my life is probably worse than most people have nightmares about. I've overcome so much. My only goal today is to make sure that kids don't walk down the same path I did.
Before I came in here, I had a couple months, I was just out on the street after they took my daughter away. I struggled getting clean and staying clean for my whole life. So, my name is Jeremy Wheaton. I'm 35 years old. I'm from Palmerton, Pennsylvania. I came here about 22 months ago. They opened the doors, welcomed me. I was resistant at first, but as soon as I started, submitting to the program and doing what I had to do, I started changing everything about myself.
Hogar Crea is a therapeutic community. We call it Hogar, meaning home, and Crea is the center for the education of the character. That's what we call Hogar Crea. After 20 months, we guarantee if they go through the process, you will have a new member of the society that would know what is the role in society. They have to learn how to get familiar with the rules and regulations of the programs.
How you doing, Pedro?
All right.
Your surgery all right?
Need a little
Good?
more better.
All right. More better. Hogar Crea Freemansburg, Brian speaking. How can I help you? And how much is the fee? What makes this program different is that, like I said, you're doing it for yourself. And they put it all on you. It's your accountability, your responsibility to do anything in the program. They're not going to force you to do anything at all, but they want you to take initiative to do the things that you need to do to better your life. Well, it's designed to make a structure out of your life, to have accountability and responsibility. We do work brigades. We go and do landscaping brigades. We do moving brigades. We work at warehouses. We do the sale of our baked goods. We do everything we can think of.
You are in charge of a whole home, not just yourself. You got 20 residents, more and more, that you have to take care of and make sure that everything gets done the way it's supposed to. You have to manage, the house. You got to make sure bills are paid. You got to make sure that the guys are getting therapies, and you're managing the food, everything. I have a little girl that I'm going to be taking care of, so it really taught me that, okay, I can take care of our house, I can take care of her. When you go to another facility, they don't give you that much responsibility. One, it made me feel good that people were trusting me again. When you're in addiction, you lose a lot of trust from a lot of people. I think in recovery, you need that part too. That really helps to have that responsibility to be able to know that you can do this. You just have that responsibility, take care of things.
With opiate addiction, it takes 18 months to actually rid it of yourself. It's why longevity here it's really important, because if you're not going to be here for long term, you're not going to change. This was the first program that would accept me as a long-term solution to my problem. But you have to be strong. If you're not, what's the point of being here? Until someone says, look, I've had enough. And when they do, this place is waiting. It's always going to be here.
This program is the first collaboration where all 7 Pennsylvania public media stations are using each of our media platforms to bring awareness to this serious issue. Our hope is that through our efforts, citizens will have access and information on where to get help and to save lives. On behalf of Pennsylvania Public Media, I'm Paula Giangiacomo. Thank you for watching.
The preceding program was presented by Battling Opioids, a project of Pennsylvania Public Media.
Additional support provided by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Participating in a project like this evokes difficult memories. We are grateful to the individuals who stepped up to share their stories in hopes of helping others and saving lives. We are privileged to have 3 of them with us today. Our first speaker, Beth Ice, was featured in the segment produced by WQED in Pittsburgh. And as we saw, Beth lost her son, Chris Wall, a Penn State engineer, and at the age of 33. Despite their grief, Beth and Bill resolved to help others by providing a place of respite for people in treatment. Beth.
Thank you very much, and I'm thrilled that public television is doing this. It needs to happen. It needs to happen. I want to clarify something first. Chris's room is in a place called the Care Center in Washington, Pennsylvania. And whenever it first came to be, it happened because, like our segment showed, that there was an obituary that said Chris died from the disease of addiction. And people wanted to support, they wanted to send money, they wanted to do something, and they asked us what to do with the money. So we said, send it to the Care Center in Washington. That's where Chris hung out because he had nothing to do. He couldn't get hired, nobody wanted to hire him. So all this money apparently went to the Care Center. One day we got a phone call and they said, what do you want us to do with all this money? And we said, well, just do whatever you want. We have no idea, I still have no idea how much money was sent in, who sent it in, it didn't matter. But we said, do what you think would be good. And they said, we have an idea. We said, okay. And they came up with Chris's room, and we are supporting it. So it really was not Bill and myself who did this. I just want to give credit where credit is due. It's a wonderful place. I'm so happy that it exists. It's a legacy for my son, part of a legacy. And I'm very proud that that could be done for him. I need to say a couple other things. First of all, we were talking about how many people who die of an overdose in Pennsylvania. That's 1.5 persons an hour, approximately, who die of an overdose in Pennsylvania. It's a lot. Chris and I had a conversation a couple years before he died because some of his friends were dying from overdoses. And I said, Chris, we just gotta get this taken care of. I don't want you to be a statistic. And Chris kind of looked at me sheepishly and said, well, I don't want to be a statistic either. But he was a statistic. And a couple of years later, in May of 2016, I think part of the reason that he was a statistic, and part of the reason a lot of other statistics occur, people who die, is because there are gaps in care. I can't emphasize that enough. Chris went through rehab several times. He went through detox, he went through rehab. One time he was lucky enough to get put into a halfway home immediately. 2 other times, he's back out on the street. He had, like I said before, he had nothing to do with his time because no one would hire him. So he just got back into it again. We feel very, very strongly that there need to be more halfway houses, or there need to be more facilities of some kind that will fill these gaps, because that is a major, major part of it. And treatment can't be a month. It needs to be longer, and it needs to be lifelong for certain individuals. The more you use the drug, the more your body gets used to it and the less control you have. People don't understand that. Addiction is a disease. Addiction is a disease. You can say it over and over and over again. And until people understand that, the stigma will stay. So I feel very, very strongly, as you can tell, that I really think filling the gaps in care really, really needs to happen. And until that does, we're going to have people literally fall through, and we're going to have more statistics. There's a really good website out there. I'm sure you're aware of it. Anybody who's done any research, it's the NIDA, National Institute of Drug Addiction, or I think that's what it's called. Anyway, there's lots and lots of information on there that would be great for the general public to realize. It's a good source to go to. And I think that would help people understand how this is a disease. I can't think of anything else I'd really like to say. Oh, I can think of a million things I'd like to say, but I don't want to take too much time. But really, we do need to raise the awareness. One other thing, addiction accompanies mental health issues often. So it's not just addiction that needs to be treated. The mental health issues also need to be addressed. My son and many, many others also had intense anxiety. The anxiety led them to use benzos or some other kind of drug. Benzos, when they were under the influence of that, allowed them to get rid of their inhibitions. So they think, oh, they can do anything, they're invulnerable, and they get themselves right back to where they were. So the anxiety, the depression has to be treated along with the addiction. So thank you very much. I'm thrilled that the state of Pennsylvania and public broadcasting is taking on this initiative. It needs to happen.
Thank you, Beth. And thank you for sharing your story. And next up, I'd like to welcome Alexis Johnson.
Good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen, Senate and House members, and all of the public media stations. I would like to say thank you for having me here. It's a great honor, and I traveled a little bit of a ways to get here today. But first, I'd like to say that I used to be that addict that y'all are having these forums and committee meetings on. I used to be that person. And what the second senator had to say absolutely hit home with me. We don't treat addiction like a disease, and I'm going to tell you why. When a person needs their blood pressure medication, they're not robbing grandma. When a person has cancer, they're not stealing from a pharmacy. When a person has any other type of illness, they're not overdosing in front of their children and dying. And that's what leads to the junkie, the term junkie. You know, when I come up here and I talk, I never write down what I'm gonna say. And people say that's either incredibly stupid or incredibly smart. And I'm not sure which. So what I'm gonna tell you today here absolutely comes from my heart. And I'm gonna be blunt. Does anybody in this room suffer from addiction personally? 2? 1.5, maybe? Yay? Okay. So I want everybody to do me a favor and close your eyes. And imagine your worst sickness of your life, like you were dying sickness. You had the aches, your heart hurt, your body hurt, you were throwing up, you couldn't get out of the bathroom, your whole body hurt to a degree that you have never felt before. Now multiply that times 1,000,000, and that's what a heroin sickness feels like, or an opioid sickness feels like. I can't even describe to you the pain that you go through when you're trying to detox off these medications. And that is what makes addicts go and do the things that they do. We normally wouldn't rob grandma or rob a pharmacy or let somebody die because we're afraid of going back to jail. And when you see my story, the way I look is a blessing and a curse because of the way I looked, I was able to doctor shop. And because of the way I look now, people look at me and there's no way you've been to state prison. There's no way you've overdosed 7 times. There's no way you've died twice. There's no way, you ended up with 3 DUIs by the time you were 27. I had blown out both of my veins, both of my forearms have track marks. I was shooting 50 bags of heroin a day. I went through 60 grand in 5 months on a relapse from a hysterectomy. I lost a brother and sister to cancer. There is nobody beyond hope. There is nobody too far gone from this disease. And right now, my story, I have legitimately given up everything in my life to make a difference, to stop kids from walking down the same path, to hopefully begin working with policymakers to change, because who better to know than the expert of what works and what doesn't? Did you know that, well, you wouldn't know, but the first 2 drugs I tried in college were cocaine and ecstasy. Did you know that 1% of freshman high schoolers, 1% use cocaine every weekend? That's 1 million of our children are snorting cocaines on the weekends in high school. I didn't even know what drugs were in high school. I never touched a drug, never drank, graduated top 5 in my high school class. Was a virgin. I had full dreams of doing a whole thing that I wanted to do in life. And I went to college, joined a sorority, had my first drink, had my first DUI 3 months later. That is how my story went. Today I share at high schools, and I am brutally honest. The pictures you saw, I've shown 6th graders. And I said, this can and will be you. You know, the parents think not my child. Yes, your child. Yes, it can happen to your child. And that term junkie, survivor. I've launched a survivor campaign to try and get people to replace the word addict with survivor. When you're in active addiction, you pray every day for death. And last year, 72,000 addicts got their wish. I want to make it not one more. And I will do whatever I can. Whatever I can. And having stuff like this, I've never heard of anything being done like this before. You know, I just attended a conference in West Virginia last week, and they're talking about how transportation is one of the biggest barriers to a person being able to stay sober. Gaps, you know, they don't have driver's licenses. If you have felonies, you can't get hired at certain jobs. We need to take a look and start changing some of these policies and these procedures so an addict, when they get out of treatment, they can actually feel like a human being again and get integrated back into society. I think we need to start addressing needle exchange programs. They've had tremendous success in other states that I know of. I know we don't want to talk about that, but I think it's time that we do talk about it. And I know the Lilly House in West Virginia is the 2nd house in the country that is open for babies being born addicted. So all of these changes, I believe, are going to start and make a difference. But when I say I devoted my life to this, I legitimately quit my 6-figure-a-year job to do this with no backbone, no nothing. And I think that starting to crush the stigma is where it starts. And we need all 25 million people who are in recovery in the United States to stand up and say, yes, I survived. I don't care if you have 24 hours, 24 years, because legitimately all we have is today. I really want to thank everybody here for allowing me to come and share my story. I live it every day, so I don't think that's special, but obviously it is, and it's helping, and I appreciate that so much. So thank you for having me.
Amazing story, thank you. Thank you so much. It was really powerful. I'd like to invite to the podium our final guest, Don Tollefson. Many of you may know Don as a popular television sportscaster in the 70s and the 80s. However, his struggle with addiction cost him his job and his freedom. Don is devoted to using his experience to minister to others in need, and his story will be told in our segment produced by WHYY that will air this Thursday night. We are grateful to have Don share his story with us. Don?
Thank you, Tom, and everyone. I come here with great humility today, and also enormous gratitude. A very specific little note is when I found out that Geisinger was sponsoring this, I was so proud that 1,810 days ago, I walked into a Geisinger rehab in Waverly, Pennsylvania, near Scranton and Wilkes-Barre, called Marworth. And Marworth saved my life. And I stand before you today as I introduce myself every time I'm asked to speak anywhere for any reason. I'm a gratefully recovering alcoholic, drug addict, and ex-felon. And I think it's important to be as rigorously honest as I can about my past so that I can be rigorously honest about our future in the recovery movement. And I don't want to, in any way, shape, or form, allow any of us in this room or those we have contact with between now and 8 o'clock on Thursday to underestimate the role that this news magazine and this enormously impressive website can play in saving people's lives. And I greatly appreciate the public media people who are in the room and all the people they represent at their individual stations and collectively. And I don't think they really may fully grasp, unless you've been an addict, I don't think you can really fully grasp what it means to those of us who are recovering to have people not stigmatize us, but try to help us, not look down upon us and talk to us, but listen to us. And I really, really owe a debt of gratitude to public media for giving me an opportunity to have a few minutes to tell my story on Thursday night and online. And I also would be remiss, although the elected officials had to get back to work, there's a lot going on in the legislature right now, but as long as we have a public employee here, those of us who are in recovery and in positions where we work to help others get into successful recovery owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to people in governmental positions. When you describe what it is you're doing, when I have been able to see on the streets of Philadelphia where I have my ministry in Kensington, which is the national epicenter of fentanyl-laced heroin deaths right now, when I see what is done by public agencies to try to prevent tragedies, I'm very, very grateful for all that you do. But I come here as well to make a couple of points, as a couple of people before me did. And you know what, I want to just say something about you two young women, if I may. I spent many, many years on television talking about losing Philadelphia teams, and we started winning, Philadelphia teams started winning, and I always tried to avoid one word when I was describing highlights, and I cringe as a sports fan when I hear announcers say, "That was a courageous catch. Boy, that guy went across the middle. We know he's making $10 million a year, but what courage that is." No, you know, courage is doing what Chris's parents are doing. Courage is doing what Alexis and so many other people who have become the survivors you spoke so eloquently of are doing. That's real courage, and we owe the courage of people like this and all the others in recovery who are not only survivors, but they're thriving in their recovery and in their survival to try to prevent one more death and one more gap in treatment. And I wish the legislators were still here, but they'll get a note from me within the next week that elected officials have got to address the enormous and despicable greed of the pharmaceutical industry and the insurance industry, which both have blood on their hands. And until, as controversial as that may be, and with the full knowledge that there are wonderful people in those professions, and American pharmaceuticals have saved more lives than any medical breakthrough in the history of the world, there's still some really bad things going on that we need to legislate against. And I'll tell you about something that I hope happens in closing after people watch this on Thursday, and I hope all of us encourage people. I've been on social media, I've been making calls, I've been talking to local media outlets to try to get people to watch, and if not, get to that website and get other people to that website. And I hope it happens to everyone who is exposed to this enormously powerful message, is that they say, well, what can I do? What can I do? And there's three things that I'm currently working on. I've been very fortunate with my ministry since I got out of prison 2.5 years ago to be able to train a lot of wonderful volunteers on the streets. And that gives me 1 and hopefully soon 2 days to work on policy issues and projects that I think we need to emphasize in recovery. And I know how painful it is for you to remember Chris, but one of the things that we're working on in Philadelphia is trying to get And families have to agree to this, and it's a difficult decision, and it requires the tremendous courage I just spoke of. But so many times we lose people and their obituary says that that person died of natural causes. No, that person lost their battle with what is oftentimes a tragically deadly disease. And when anyone reads an obituary that says that with rigorous honesty, they may look differently. They may look differently at a spouse or a child or another relative or a coworker or a social friend and say, man, you know, I think they may have a problem. Maybe it's time I talk to them and listen to them. And the second thing that I'm working on right now, and you talked so eloquently about gaps in treatment, is that I don't know if this is the clinical term, but we refer to it internally among the 8 hospitals that I'm working with in the Philadelphia region as a warm handoff. When a person overdoses and goes to an emergency room, and thankfully their life is saved by all the great medical advances that we have made in dealing with addiction, initially on the street with naloxone, and I'm working now with a guy who has a business that puts those industrial medicine cabinets in places of business. And we're working on getting employers to say, you know, we need to put naloxone, we need to put Narcan in there because we got employees dying in the restrooms and dying on the parking lot and all. But the warm handoff, as we call it, is something that's now happening at 8 and hopefully soon more hospitals in a very structured way. And that is when the person survives, they don't get discharged with a good luck. Good luck. Nice to have you here, and I'm glad you filled out all our paperwork, but, you know, they get to talk to, and in fact, it's demanded of them, unless they storm out, that they talk to social workers, and they talk to counselors, and they get information they can take back with them to wherever they're going, and they're given a source of resources that is enormous so that they can really get continuing help beyond the life-saving moments and all. And the last thing that I would encourage every one of us to do when we talk to others about what can you do is in this marvelous, marvelous segment that my great friends at WHYY put together with 2 of the women who are patients of mine who have survived the unspeakable and are alive and talk about it eloquently in this news magazine and all. I was quoted in the interview that was done that I was so impressed by saying that when I pull up on the streets of Kensington, and ironically sometimes I park on Hope Street. For anyone in Philadelphia, there's a street named Hope Street, blocks from where 35 people died in 5 days in December of 2016. And when I pull up sometimes, I get out of my car and I go walk over to people. There's probably a Hollywood image that there's that former sportscaster who got in all sorts of trouble, but now is trying to change his life. And he's going to go over and say, I'm from Action News. I'm from the NFL on Fox. I'm from ESPN. I got a room with your name on it in Detox at 8th and Girard. Hop in and let's go. And here's 8 things you need to do to save and change your life. No, it's not about telling people what to do. It's listening to them tell you how they got to where they are and how they can get to where we are in recovery. And when you listen, the solutions are always within the people. And there's a common misconception, I think, that 99.9% of all people who are still in active addiction are brick wall denial type people. They have denial. And that they have a reluctance to accept help. No, they just have heard stories about people who got in for a 28-day stay and got kicked out by an insurance company that made a phone interview from the Midwest or wherever and kicked them out of rehab. Or, you know, they're so skeptical of going into treatment. They have this reluctance underscored by what they believe will happen or tragically not happen and all. And if we can just listen to them and look at the links in programs like this and websites like this, we can listen to them well enough that they can lead themselves. They can lead themselves to a life that I refuse to call. And I'll close on this note. I'm sorry if I'm rambling, but when you're in rehab initially, I'm sure we can relate to this and all. And by the way, since you're a state government employee, I owe a great debt of gratitude to the Department of Corrections, because I was in 3 SCIs, and the counseling I got, and the reentry programs, a lot of them which specified jobs in recovery, because such a high percentage of those of us who were inmates or are inmates are addicted human beings and all. I'm very grateful to what the SCIs did for me and all. But the thing that I think can really, really happen here is when this person sees that light and we encourage them, we take the resources that we know are available and we say, you pick, you pick. You do something that fits your situation, and your future can be as bright as possible. And what I was referring to is when I walked into my first AA meeting, which happened at Marworth, the Geisinger facility. I'd never been to an AA meeting, even though I'd been an alcoholic since I was a teenager, and became addicted, as you did after an automobile accident, to opioids and all. And a man got up at the first meeting I went to. They brought in an outside AA meeting to Marworth, and I was so ignorant that when he said, we're going to get started quickly because we have chips tonight, I told the FDNY firefighter next to me, who was also in rehab with me, I said, this is so great. They're going to give us potato chips and snacks afterwards. And he says, what an idiot. He says, Dawson, you're a moron. They have chips which say how long you've been in recovery and all. But they used to say something, and I'll leave you with this hopefully encouraging note. They used to say, if you stay clean and sober, as I've now been able to do for almost 5 years, you'll have a life beyond your wildest dreams. And I always thought that was a little bit hokey, and so I've substituted for that 4 words from the great American novelist John Grisham and all. If we listen to these people who are in active addiction, and we listen to them well enough, and we encourage them to go in the directions that they realize can change and save their lives, they will have a life that is liberated and wonderfully unburdened and all. And I hope all of us in recovery, or those who are not in recovery but know people who are, realize that with efforts like this, and whatever we can do as individuals, we can give millions and millions of Americans who we might lose otherwise a life that is liberated and wonderfully unburdened. God bless you all. Thanks very much.
From Don and Alexis and Beth, we've heard a lot of hard-earned truth today, and we should all be grateful for that. We, public media, are going to continue our work to publicize both the documentary that's coming up and the resources that we are making available. And tomorrow, we'll be sending emails to all the members of the House and the Senate and their staffers to spread the word. And my request to each of you is to do the same, to spread the word. Use your social media channels, use your face-to-face communication, use all the mechanisms that are available to you to draw people to the program, draw people to the website, and to do what you can. So many pieces of advice today about what each of us can do. Let's take up that challenge and do that work. I want to thank you all for joining us today. I want to thank my colleagues, and I want to thank each of you for being here today. It's been an inspiring but also a very emotional afternoon. Thank you all.